All right, so let me talk about music for a little bit, right? Let's talk about balloonerism. Balloonerism. That's a not a real term, but that's the title of what is essentially the second posthumous album from the late great Mac Miller. Now, I know you not well. All right, so okay, so I'm free to ask this, right? Are you familiar at all with Mac Miller's music or albums or anything? Or no?
Yes, he is probably my second or third favorite white rapper. Uh,
Well done. Nice, nice.
yeah. It's him. Okay, so in terms of white rappers, my favorite is well, I'm still probably number one, but Paul Wall and then Mac Miller, third. He's like, yeah, he's all the
Dude,
rap white rappers.
I like the fact that you are one of the few people to come out this year and say you are Paul Wall fan, right? Because I mean,
Listen,
like I don't know, I still hold the People's Champ as his crowning
yeah,
achievement, but that, I'm sorry to say that's like the only album I listen from.
Paul Wall, and to get through Paul Wall, we taking Paul Wall in the racial draft, Paul Wall too clean, boy.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mac Miller, yeah, it was like when he passed away, that was like a real shock. I was like, wow, this guy was really coming up and doing something interesting. Because when he first came out, I was like underwhelmed. I was like, it's a white rapper trying to jump into a thing and they're not really doing anything interesting. But then that first like big album came out, I was like, wow, this guy is like a real talent though. And then you hear the news about the OD and it's like, wow, dude, that just cut short that talent, amazing talent, get cut short. So is that. But
Yeah.
I listened to the first album that I was out after is that I didn't listen to this one yet, but I listened to
Circles. Yeah.
listen to that and I dug the hell out of it. But he's not, to be honest, he's not somebody on my super regular list, but he did. So it's like he up there. So yeah,
Yes, it's the same here too. Like I wouldn't go out of my way to listen to a Mac Miller song, when like if I just want to relax or chill or like if I like walking or whatever, like I would put on a Mac Miller song, right? But it's just if something new pops up or if it's like, oh, I haven't listened to Circles or Good AM, which still is my favorite album from him, right? Yeah, I'll put it up, right? So I feel like Mac is in a very interesting place, like how we look at his music now is really interesting now, seeing that he passed away years ago, right? And I noticed this with Circles, right? Which was one of my favorite albums of 2020, right? It wasn't like top 10 for me, but it was up there, right? But this was him, really embracing his singer-songwriter persona, right? Because he did a lot of singing on that album, right? But there was just this, I don't know. It was just this overarching, how to say, vibe about it. It's almost as if, well, two things. One, as if we were just hearing him, from the great beyond. It's almost like he just speaking from the dead, right? Just doing what he does best. Expressing himself and all that kind of stuff. And also, like I think I made a joke about this, but I don't really see it as a joke now, right? I feel like with that album, this was Mac achieving his final form, if you will, right? If you want to talk about like DBZ, if you want to look at it like from an anime perspective, right? This was him achieving his true form, like his truest form, his final form, and this was like the last album he ever recorded, apparently, before he died, right? So it's like that. But it was just so like just genuinely beautiful, right? Just
yeah, right,
artistically, that's what it
yeah,
was, right? And no lie, like first couple of times I listened to that, I was shedding man tears. Right? Like it was just sad to listen to them because it was just so achingly beautiful, right? But it's from a guy who, yeah, we will never really hear from in the flesh again, and it just, wow, like it just really was an album that I listened to a good few times, but I just didn't want to get back into it because I felt like if I listened it, I'd just be like crying buckets of tears or whatnot, right? But the funny thing is, right, going into Balloonerism, right? I actually recapped Circles, right? I think that it still holds up, right? I felt like John Bryan's production. John Bryan is this famous producer. All right, so for us film guys, he's famously known for the guy who did the score for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And he also worked on I think not all the tracks, but I think he worked on he kind of co-produced Kanye West's oh gosh, Late Registration. So you see that track heard
right,
him say the
right.
opening song heard him say, yeah, he worked on the back, right?
Celebrating his 20th anniversary, by the way.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
How can I forget? Yeah.
yeah,
So can I remember Kanye say he wanted more of a cinematic sound. So yeah,
yeah,
it's John Bryan. John Bryan was the guy who did that, right? And I
Right.
felt like what he did, because like like behind the scenes, they were working on the album, right? But because he died, John had more time to kind of fine tune the beats and whatnot, right? And the production, right? So yeah, he just did Mac Miller justice, right? Just sonically and thematically, and it just if you just listen to it now, but it just sounds sonically beautiful, right? Even though is the kind of music that when you listen to and just knowing that the guy that you're listening to is no longer alive, right? Yeah, like I said, when I talked about it back in 2020, there's no way you could walk out of that from a first viewing without tears in your eyes. It's just so heartbreaking, you know what I mean? So it's like that, right? But I wasn't following up on everything Mac Miller wise, right? Like still to this day, I know that Madlib, actually have like did some work with him, right? Because on the Talent Quality record that came out a couple of years ago, uh, well, it is by Liberation too, right? So Madlib
Right.
and Talent Quality. That was in my top 10 actually, right? Yeah, there's a
Right.
song that features Mac Miller. I know that's just like there's like a verse. It's just a verse basically, right? But I know that's from the work that he did with Madlib years ago, right? So I was just there like, all right, well, maybe one day we will hear this, Mac Miller and Madlib collaboration, but we still have yet to, right? So I guess we will hear that or something from that later on, right? What I didn't expect was this album here, Balloonerism, right, which actually came out like a few days ago actually, right? At the time of us recorded this, right? And what this is actually, right? So this was actually recorded in 2014. So this was around the time when he was working on a mixtape called Faces, right? And I would say for me personally, this was the project that really got me into Mac Miller. That was when I was like, all right,
Right.
there's something about this guy. He not just this lovable pop rapper or whatever it is who like to get high and have fun or whatever it is, or just like this was him kind of going into his emo phase, right? I would say watching movies with the sound off, right? That was the record where he started to go on a more experimental side. Like he started to show his more experimental side with the beats that he chose and all that kind of stuff, right? He was straying away from the kind of pop rappy kind of thing that he was doing, right? Using pop rap, I should say frat rap, right? That whole kind of fun celebratory stuff, right? Getting high and drunk and having fun, right? Living life, right? YOLO. It was that vibe he was on, right? Then he went experimental, and then with Faces now, I felt that's when he embraced more of a emo rapper kind of vibe, right? It was more about, look, success wearing me down, and I need drugs to cope, and it was that. No, it was about heartbreak and all these kind of things, right? A very long mixtape though. I think it clocks in like about an hour and a half. But I think that it's absolutely worth checking out. And for me, that was the record where I was like, all right, there's something about this guy, right? I have been following his work since, well, up until his death, right? And up to now, right? Right. So basically, this is not going to be a track by track review of the album, right? But this is just
Right.
general thoughts on this record, right? So for me, right, what surprised me, right, is that for one thing, compared to Circles, he's rapping more. There's a lot more
Right.
rapping on this album compared to Circles, which caught me by surprise, right? Because I honestly thought that it was going to be Circles too, right? But actually, some more rapping, right? Which is fine, right? Because I like when Mac raps, right? And actually, over the years, I've grown to really enjoy his singing as well too. Like he's not the best singer in the world, but he's very very emotive when it comes to his vocals, right? I think he really does a great job on the singing front, right? Also, just the style of it all, right? And this is just off of stuff that I found out through Genius, right? This was basically recorded in a week, right? And this was around the time when he was working on Faces, right? Back in 2014, right? And for some reason, it just never saw the light of day until now, right? And I could understand why now, right? So before I get to the music itself, right? So yeah, because the interesting place where Mac is right now, right, is that people now, myself included, like really started to appreciate like just his artistic growth, right? Because he's a guy that just wanted to try new things, right? He didn't want to stay in one lane, so he wasn't doing the frat rap thing anymore. He didn't want to do emo rap anymore. He sung, and in this case, the album, he did jazz rap, right? And he just did different things, right, throughout his career, right? I feel like no, because I listened to Swimming, and because I was comparing it to Good AM, I didn't really like I didn't like Swimming compared to that, right? But unfortunately, see that he passed away now. I even see Auntie Fantano do that. Like, he went back to Swimming and he actually appreciated the album more because he didn't like it compared to Good AM, right? So it's like that, right? I feel like no, with that album in particular, Swimming and Circles, and this new album here now, people are really gonna look back at his earlier bodies of work, right? The earlier albums he did before he really became, big in a sense, right? With albums like, Faces and Good AM and stuff like that, right? People are gonna look back at the trajectory, that's the growth, the experimentation that he was doing then, and really appreciate that, right? Because I feel like if he had dropped this right before Good AM, it wouldn't have been well received. People would have just thought that it was just him trying too hard to be weird and experimental, and none of this stuff fitting or making any sense, or it's just too dreary, whatever, right? I don't know how I would have responded if it came out in 2015, but in 2025, I think the album is brilliant, and I'll just call this one time. This is probably my first favorite album of 2025, right? So for one thing, right, the production though is so superb though, so well done, right? According to Genius, this was like this week-long jam session, right? And it has that sort of feel to it, right, with the live instrumentation. Also, we boy Thundercat, he was there,
Okay.
with the bass and whatnot. His contribution to the album was really worthwhile in my opinion. Also, we girl, or to say my girl Scissor, she was there as well, right? She provide, she actually sings first on the album, believe it or not, right? And she does a hook or two later on, right? But what catch me, right, is that I thought, like, Circles, this was just okay. This was just some tracks that they was just working on, and they were just unfinished. So they was just there collecting virtual dust, and then they just decided, here's what, let's just take these vocals or whatever, let's add some instrumentation to it, like fine tune it, and then release it. Actually, no. What we hear on this record actually was recorded back in 2013 or 2014, right? Even Scissor's verse, even Scissor's vocals, even Thundercat's vocals in the beginning, and his bass work and whatnot, all that was recorded back then, back in 2014. That's wild, though. That's actually really wild, right? So while I'm listening to all this, I'm there telling myself, all right, so they probably like remaster, they probably mix or master something here, though. They probably did something behind the scenes, like in post, if you will, right? Before they released this. I don't know what was done, right? But I would generally be surprised if everything that is on this record was the exact way that it was recorded and mixed back then. That would be amazing to me, in my opinion. I don't know. I guess, one way or the other, I guess I'll find out, right? But yeah, the production from this, though, is just top notch, right? In a sense that it's just so immersive, right? It just puts you into what is essentially like this big, like, again, this week-long studio session. So you're just there with Mac and his team, and you're just hearing just how the instrumentation sounds, right? It just sounds great, right? Lyrically, though, this is what really caught me as well too, right? It's Mac touching on just mainly about escapism, right? That's the idea of us trying to escape our mundane lives, or even when we kind of live our lives to the fullest, right? There's always these moments where we just feel like, what's the point of it all? Why are we here and all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, not surprising actually, especially if you've been kind of tuning into Mac's work from since Swimming up to now. Yeah, he also touches on drug use, right? And how that kind of aids in terms of this escapism, how it kind of helps us out. Well, in quotes, helps us out, right? But you also see the damaging effects of it as well, right? But what makes this album so interesting as well too, right, is that it's kind of prophetic as well too, right? Because this was recorded like about, let me just say, about 5 years before he died, right? Or 4 years or so before he died, right? And he throughout the album, he will touch on, you know, the meaning of life, what it means to be alive. He will touch on death. There's moments where he's talking about, you know, what happens when you die and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's almost like even with his success, right? And even with him. And throughout the album, you'll also kind of say, look, like, I'm successful now, but trust me, I'll get bigger, you know, I'll get bigger, right? So you have the penultimate track, Rick's Piano, right? Which has this really gorgeous but also melancholy piano melody that's kind of driving everything. And trust me, that will stay in your brain for weeks after you hear this song, right? Especially when he gets that hook, the best is yet to come. That will stay with you, right? But he just kind of throws out these scenarios about, you know, things could get better, things will get better, things will get better. Even if it's just me sort of seeing it as a mantra, I don't really 100% believe it. Trust me, things will get better, right? So even though he's fairly optimistic here, there's still this underlying sense of, nah, I could lose this all very soon and I had to be ready for it, or am I ready for it, right? So it's just that looming threat of death that kind of hovers throughout this album, right? But at the same time, because of the production, though, it just flows so well, though. It just has this really laid back vibe to it, though, you know, just the and you know, because it touches it, because it borrows a lot from jazz rap, right? There's a lot of jazz rap in it, I should say. Yeah, it's just a smooth listen from start to end, right? Also, like, and kind of not surprising as well, too, right? It kind of goes on some psychedelic routes as well, right? Especially in the end, though, right? After this touch on this track here, Tomorrow Will Never Come, right? This is the final track. This clocks in at about 11 minutes, right? And this is one of those songs that when you hear it, you can't unhear it, right? It's like that, right? Boy, is just one of the most immersive songs I've heard like in a long while, right? It's Mark on his singing shit, right? He's singing throughout it, right? But it's just the production around it is just so cavernous, though, so dense and layered, right? And just thematically, you know, he's just touching on death and, you know, what it means, you know, well, when we reach the afterlife, right? You know, would it be all worth it to the end now? You know, it's like that, right? It's just so haunting, right? But at the same time, it just sort of embodies where Mac's head was, you know, at that time up until his death, right? I also mentioned drug use as well, right? Because you have tracks like Stone, for example. And just a few other tracks where he will use a person to describe, hey, you know, life going hard, so here's what, use these drugs, and you know, this is gonna numb the pain, it's gonna make you feel better, right? Even though it's gonna come back and bite you, right? Yes, he is basically talking about himself here, right? But what I like though is that, you know, through his lyricism, right, which is always done in a sort of like a sardonic kind of way, it's kind of saying like, look, it's pretty much understandable why you would resort to that to, you know, to kind of ease the pain that you go through in life, but ultimately it's just not gonna help you. Like it's not gonna be enough for you. You'll always feel hurt, you'll always feel the pain anyway. It will do nothing for you, right? And yes, even though he has wrestled with it in the past leading up to his death, because remember it was this cocktail of drugs he took, right? You could still see him here kind of wrestling with that here too, him kind of saying, look, this is where it all leads down to anyway, but I can understand why you do this or why somebody would do this, but at the same time I do it too, but I trying to fight it, you know what I mean? So is that kind of, you know, that kind of conflict that you hear throughout this record as well too, right? But in no way, of course, the album is not condoning it, right? It's not telling you, oh, you know, when life goes bad, you know, take these. No, that's not what they're going for. And I don't think anybody who listens to this album will say, oh, this is promoting drug use. No, it's not like that, right? So yeah, he touches on all these things, but it's not too heavy, right? Because of the vibe of the album, it's very laid back, you know. You understand what's being said here, but it doesn't wear down, it doesn't bog it down or anything like that, right? Also, another thing that works well is just the sequence of it, right? Just how the songs flow into each other. I thought really worked. The rapping is on point, the singing is on point as well too, right? But again, it's one of those albums, again, just because we've seen it, because, you know, he's not alive, right? Again, it's just really one of those interesting records where, because it was recorded years ago, right? How would it have been received back then, right? I love the album. I think it's great, right? But I am speaking as someone who has kind of seen his career reach the level where it reached, and then he died. Unfortunately, right, and through these circumstances, right. So yeah, even when you go into this album blind, right, you can't help but hear these songs, especially just the production and how tonally it sounds, right. It sounds very psychedelic, right. Very and that goes into why the title is called Balloonerism, right? Yeah, it's music to get high to, right? But is how you attain that high, right? Is it through the music or is it through the implied drug use, right? So it's like that, right? Or is it through the themes that being addressed here, right? So it is about getting high, but it's just how you approach it when you go into it, right? That's the thing about it, right? But I think the album works so it in terms of just showing, just how versatile of an artist Mark was, right? Again, we talking about a period where he was transitioning into this whole emo phase thing, and then after that, after Faces came out, he dropped Good AM, and then he dropped that one. I forgot the name of it, but this is basically the one where, because he was in love with Ariana Grande, because they were together at a point in time, man basically do this album just sort of being so happy because, oh my god, I'm in love, like in actual love, like literally that was the album, right? I forgot the name of it. The something divine, the feminine divine or something like that. I forgot the name of it right now, right? Not one of my favorites from him though, but because of where he was in life, because he was in love, I was like, alright, I understand, right? But Good AM was better, you know what I mean? So it's like that, right? But just to wrap things up, right? So if this is to be his final album, right? Because, at the time when Circles came out, we thought this was the final thing we'll ever hear from Mac, right? But we get this thing out of the blue, right? They're like, okay, all right, cool. And then I should mention too, there's also a short film that is, I think it's going to be having a limited theatrical release in the States or something like that.
Okay.
I do hope it comes out digitally so I could see it for myself. But I think this involves the making of that album. So probably it will just involve like footage of him and SZA and other people recording that album over the week-long course that it took to make it, right? I feel it'll be about that. I don't think maybe it might be about Mac's legacy and all that kind of stuff, but I think it'll just be about how that album was recorded, right? But I do hope to see it very soon, right? But yeah, this album was great, right? Just in terms of just showing the versatility of Mac, right? Whether, from the singing, the songwriting. I should also mention too, he also handles a bulk of the production, right? He goes under this alias, Larry Fisherman. If you're familiar with his work, Larry Fisherman is a name he's always used when it comes to his production work, right? But I would say if it, like for me, I'm not too familiar with his production work, right? Even though I listened to his previous records, but this one kind of fully embodies what he was able to do, right? Just take these, just these live instruments and just create these great like sonic passages, right? Very ambient and just very immersive, very mood inducing. That's the best way I could sum it up, right? And it just makes for just this great this great listening experience, right? It's very insightful just from a thematic standpoint, very thoughtful as well. In no way does the album endorse drug use or whatnot, but it explores that and explores why people use that to escape the humdrum day-to-day life now, you know what I mean? It shows just you can have all the wealth and all the fame and all that kind of stuff, but what is it all add up to at the end of the day, right? So is that stuff, right? It's not is familiar territory, don't get me wrong, right? It's stuff that we've heard before from other artists, right? And you've heard it from Mac as well, right? Throughout let me just say the last chapter of his career, right? But in this case though, it's just this great package where you just get all of that here, right? And it just feels, just as I wrap things up, right? It almost feels like foreshadowing in a sense, right? Foreshadowing in terms of the direction his music will go, and for better or for worse, where his life will go as well too, right? And I think that's like the biggest takeaway of it all, right? Just how almost prophetic it all was. It's almost like he was just kind of letting us know, almost like he knew what was going to happen, right? Even though he had no clue, literally, right? It's almost like he knew, oh, this is how my life is going to end, or this is where I'm going to be at in my life and all that kind of stuff, right? It's very eerily prophetic as well too, right? Especially given how his last few albums were, right? including Circles, right, which was released posthumously as whatnot, right? But yeah, as I said before, this is first great album of the year. If you're a Mac Miller fan, definitely check it out. If you're a first timer to his work, I would say definitely check it out as well too, as I feel this album kind of embodies what he was great at, right? Whether it's production, songwriting, rapping, singing as well too, right? Just his versatility across the board, right? And this again, just in terms of just this insightful, thoughtful look into, yeah, his thought process, right? Just how he saw the world, how he saw his life, how he saw creativity and whatnot. Yeah, it absolutely works, right? I don't know if this could be the last thing that we'll get from him, just posthumously. Because for all we know, 5 years from now, because yeah, I mean, Circles came out 5 years ago, right? For all we know, 5 years from now, we might get some other work from this guy, right? But I think that even if we had to wait that long, because his work was able to stand so long, right? I'm not saying stand the test of time, right? But just hold up so remarkably well. Yeah, I think we will be happy and overjoyed if a new record comes out, right? From work that he did in the past, right? Yeah, Mac Miller's a legend, man. True and true, man. And this is just yet another example of that, right? So for me, rating wise, yeah, light 4.5 out of 5, man. This is one of the year's best records. This is one that I hope that I'll be going back to throughout this year. And who knows, it might show up in my top 10 as far as best albums of the year go, right? But yeah, this year kicked off with this. I mean, I know they had some other records that came out earlier this month, but this was one that I really wanted to check out, and this was one that I really wanted to listen to and talk about as well, right? And I'm glad I did. I'm glad that I checked it out. I'm glad that I gave it enough spins and I got the gist of it. And I'm glad that I was just able to just express my thoughts on it. I mean, no, it's not a track by track review, but it's just this overall thoughts on it. And yeah, I just think this album is great, man. So yeah, Ricardo, if you haven't, and to those listening, if you haven't, yeah, definitely check out Balloonerism. It's what he has best.